Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how to make a Japanese style stab stitch binding. I've already done the tedious work of making my template, which I'll show you how to do here for your own book in a second. I've also gone through and I've trimmed up all of the pages of my book and put them in order. So I have some pretty paper that's doubled up for more structural integrity as my front cover. I am making a soft cover book here. I have some sketches that I cut up. These are just some blind contours from a long time ago. I have a envelope because I wanted a pocket in my book. I have kind of a halfway completed collage. I have this picture I really like. Notice that this is shorter, but that's okay because it's still gonna match up on the spine. I have a blank page and I have a sketch that I glued together front to back, as well as a picture. And unfortunately the picture got a little dirty because I apparently didn't spray fixative on this. Oops, oh well. Maybe I'll do that later, or maybe not, it'll be okay. But I have everything trimmed up. I've made sure that everything lines up on my spine. I've also made sure that my edges this way, where my spine is for sure, but across this whole book, all of my edges line up. If you would like your book to be uneven on the edge that you open, that's fine. It does not matter for this style of book at all, but it is super, super important. It is imperative that where your spine is, where you're going to sew through it, that everything lines up here. So with that in mind, I also want to show you guys the tools we're going to be using. So first, get yourself a piece of scrap paper, make it the same size as your book. This is going to be really handy in making a template. You'll also probably want some binder clips. These are not essential, but they can come in really handy. If you're going to use binder clips, find some scrap cardboard because if you put binder clips directly onto your book block, it's going to dent your paper and it's going to leave ugly marks. But if you put it over cardboard, it'll distribute the pressure and prevent it from denting. So I've got 2 sets of this. I don't know if I'm going to use them or not yet, but it's better to have them at hand if you do need to use them. Of course, I also need my pencil. I have a ruler. I have an awl. You can also, of course, use a nail. And if you can find a cork, you can actually kind of make your own awl by just, especially if it's got a smaller head, you can just jam the end of a nail into it. Voila. It's not a very good awl, but it will work. You can also just use a plain nail, but it's not quite as easy to use. And then what I'm going to sew my binding with. So for this one, I'm going to use embroidery floss. I've already threaded it to spare you guys the torture of watching me thread this. But I am going to take one special extra step. I don't want to put a knot here through my eye because it's going to make too much material to pull through as I'm sewing. But what I can do is, I've got it threaded already. I can come back through and split the ply and pull back through. And this just makes it, it's not quite a knot, but it'll be really nice and it'll hold your floss together a little bit better. It's not perfect, but it's a little bit better. So the first step we're gonna do is we're gonna make our template. Like I said before, get yourself a piece of paper that's the same size as your book block so that you can draw all over it without messing up your book. The first thing I did on this was I marked the top. This is not a perfectly square piece of paper. If I put this on my table protector, my cutting mat, I can tell that it's kind of close, but I know that I ripped this edge because I was being sloppy and hasty. I'm just not going to take a risk that it's going to be square. So I'm going to mark it top, and I'm actually going to go one step further and mark front right. So I know that if I'm opening my book, this is always going to be the way it opens. So that way, if things get turned around or something, I always know that this is my front right corner. Then what I want to do is I'm going to measure in about a 1/2 inch from the edge or from my front left. I actually went a little bit too far in, pretty much as long as you measure in anywhere from 3/8 to 1/2 inch. That's a really good placement for your spine for this style of book. If you're making a much, much larger book, like, I don't know, an 11 by 14 book or 9 by 12, something like that, you might want to push this a little bit more, come in a little bit more towards 3/4 inch. But my book is relatively small. It's only, I want to say 7 by 4. So I'm going to stick with between 3/8 inch and 1/2 inch. I marked that, and then I came in and I drew a line along here. And I know that that's where I'm going to stab through with my awl. Now, the fun part is that we need to decide where we put the holes to sew through. With this style of binding, you can put as many holes as you would like, but it has to be an even number. So in this book, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can do 12, you can do 8, you can do 4. 2 is too few. It's just not going to make a very stable book, although it would be possible. Do not use an odd number because you won't be able to sew your book correctly. So even numbers only, but it can be any amount of even numbers. So there's kind of a trick. There's a trick to measuring this out. I cheated on mine, and I'm going to show you how I cheated because I hate dividing out the math. So I put my ruler down, and I noticed that my book is 4 1/4 inches. If I were working in centimeters, the math would be a little bit better. But my book is 4 1/4 centimeters. So what I did to eliminate this extra quarter is I actually scooted my ruler over by, an 1/8. Make sure I show this correctly. No, actually what I did is I scooted it over to the 1/2. So I know that there is 4 1/2 plus another 1/8. And then I've got the 1/2 over here plus another 1/8, which means that my ruler is now centered on this. And I knew that I wanted to have 1, 2, 3, 4 holes that I make. And then I actually added another one in at about halfway. It should be exactly halfway, but I don't know that I measured it 100% correctly. I added an extra set on either end just because I think it'll make it look prettier and more decorative. So again, what I did is I actually just scooted my ruler over until it was centered. Set at 4 1/2 and 1/2 plus another 1/8 lined up, and then I could just measure 1, 2, 3, 4. There are all kinds of different ways that you can go through and measure. This is just me cheating and kind of being a math slacker. But now I know, that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes prepared. And this is where I will end up poking holes through on each of my pages. And I'm going to go ahead and just put these down here so that you can see a little bit more clearly.